yeah, I think uh, that how I started with open source was more like I started realizing that I needed to share my work and also maintain the new versions and have like a history of the changes and stuff. I think I learned about Git and GitHub, and I just used GitHub like as platform where I could host the project files.
Hmm.
I think I didn't knew the possibilities of all the things you can do with GitHub, like collaboration and issue tracking and all those things.
We're being joined by Jahir today. He's an amazing Android and web developer, and he's the conference organizer of BoyaConf. He's joining us today to chat about all that and more. And let's say hello. Jahir, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm, I'm not gonna lie. I've got a little bit of a throat cold, and like I'm
Yeah.
fine. So, but I just apologize if I come off and I sound like, because I'm still trying to feel a little bit better in that regard. So, but I didn't want to miss our convo. I've been looking forward to it all week. I've had
Right.
questions about BioConf ever since it happened because it seems like it was such an awesome
Mhm.
event. Um, so before
Yeah.
we get
Right.
into that, though, I figure we'll start with you because you are still a person, right? We've been friends for a
Mhm.
while. So like, how'd you get started with development? I know that we met way back. Like, where'd you start? Like, what drove you into the development, and what's kind of your story? How'd you get here?
Yeah. Okay. So I think when I got out of school, I started a course about mechatronics. Um, and at some point we had to build like a robot that could be controlled somehow. And we decided to do it with Bluetooth. So what I did was building an app using App Inventor, which is like something like Scratch, but for Android apps. Um, when like you move blocks of code and you make it work. Um, I'm not sure if that still exists, but I think yeah, that's what I used at that time. And so after that, I just realized like many things that we can build using apps, the possibilities, and also when I had like my first phone, I got into using custom ROMs, and then icon packs and customization stuff on my phone. So I really wanted to build like my own icon pack, and like when I needed to build the app, I couldn't find like an easy way to do it, and there was like a paid dashboard and also an open source one, but the open source one was like abandoned, and the design was like a bit out of late because material design was recently announced. And the paid dashboard was like really expensive and I couldn't afford it. So what I did was like starting to learn on my own and build it for myself. Um, so yeah, I did follow some YouTube videos and started learning like the basics and getting to more complex stuff. Um, but I use the open source dashboard as reference for like the complex parts and the icon pack related stuff because
Mm-hmm.
that's really complex to be honest. So yeah.
Well, and I remember back in the day, you were right. That paid icon pack, if it's the same one that I'm thinking of, it was super like hundreds of dollars or something like that, wasn't it? Like ludicrously
Yeah, it
expensive.
was, if I'm not wrong, it was like $200 exactly.
Right.
And
Uh,
yeah, I'm not sure if it's the same you're thinking, but yeah, that's what it costed. Yeah.
right. And then I recall you had created, what was the name of your icon? Because I know that you had two versions of it, and I want to say they had different names, didn't they?
Yeah. Um,
What were the names of those projects?
oof, I don't remember right now, but I think one was like Finbo or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
the other one Earths, I think. I think I used like I just translated a keyword like the shape of the icons or something like that
Oh
into
yeah.
a random language like I don't even know which one, but yeah, it was pretty random and like I used the same word that Google Translate showed me. So
That's how you do it. I mean, that's how Vue got its name. Actually, it's a French word, I believe. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I remember it was like your icon pack template got so big. Like I remember back on Google Plus, because we were both back in Google Plus, but you're not allowed to laugh at
Mm-hmm.
people. Uh, and back in Google Plus, I think you must have had easily 30 or 40 different people that were using your icon template to generate icon packs, because they exploded in popularity. Like, wasn't this back when they like almost introduced icon packs as like a concept, really?
Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think icon packs already have some kind of
Um,
history. They already existed, and there were lots of them already. But I
mhm,
think that having like a great looking and more up to date free dashboard could be like
mhm.
the um, launch point for some people, like allowing them to build their own apps more easily, and then yeah, it, the apps just started growing, and more of them became available to people. So yeah.
For sure, for sure. Well, so one of the things that I'm always curious about with open source, like, so first of all, why open source, right? There was clearly a paid alternative that was like huge and super expensive. Like, you could have reasonably made your template paid and made it significantly cheaper, right? Was there a reason that you
Yeah.
wanted to do open source work? Is it like, did it just happen naturally? Like what was the decision process behind making your template open source?
Yeah, I think at that time I considered the possibility of making it paid because, well, I was also like looking for a bit of money to pay university and stuff and maybe get a better laptop at that time.
Hmm.
Um, but I think there were also limitations because of the country I live in. So there was no easy way for me to like receive payments. I think when I think it was really hard for me to get my PayPal account. It was like impossible at the beginning, and then it eventually was available. But my dashboard already was like free, and so I didn't want to like change things that fast, like having something free and then the next day like being, hey, you need to pay to continue using this that was already free. um, so yeah, I think uh, that how I started with open source, what was more like I started realizing that I needed to share my work and also maintain the new versions and have like a history of the changes and stuff. I think I learned about Git and GitHub, and I just used GitHub like as platform where I could host the project files.
Hmm.
I think I didn't knew the possibilities of all the things you can do with GitHub, like collaboration and issue tracking and all those things. I just like used it for uh, storage and sharing.
Right.
And eventually, people like started using. the GitHub features, and I started discovering them. Um, and also other developers would come and help every now and then, and that's how the dashboard became like more usable and have more features and stuff.
Yeah, totally. So you mentioned that like over time, like a lot of people started creating GitHub issues and pull requests. What was that like
Yeah,
when because for a while there, your template was very popular, right? And it very likely may still be, right? Like I'm sure that it's still one of the top free options for an icon pack, right? What has that
yeah.
experience been like in getting others to adopt your ecosystem or your product, right? Like what has that experience been like, and how did you kind of uh, scale and grow with that success?
Mm, I think a lot of that work is done by the same people that uses the dashboard, like they're
Mm-hmm.
um, when they create their new icon packs or their new projects, because the dashboards are now more different. Like there's one for icon packs, one for wallpapers, and one for widgets. So yeah, when people build their apps and they share like on Twitter or any social network about their new project, uh, most of them mention me, and then they also mention what they use to build their apps. And I think other people get interested and just start looking into it and using it.
Yeah, totally. um That's awesome. It's always been like super cool to like open up any random icon pack and then swipe off the side and be like, oh hey, I know this like I know exactly how this was created. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, so many cool projects built on top of it. Well, so
Mm-hmm.
speaking of your projects, a conference. I remember one day we were like, I just got a message from you and like, oh hey, by the way, I'm starting a conference. And like I was like, what? No way. Like it really threw me for a loop, like this idea that you could just start one, right? Like you don't have to like wait for anyone else to do it. You can just do it. How do you like even do that? Like what does that process look like? Because it seemed like it had pretty good turnout, which we'll talk about later, but like what is it like to organize a meetup or not just a meetup, but a conference nonetheless?
Yeah, I think when I first started talking about it, it was like I was naive. I didn't know the hard parts of it. I just thought it would be like really easy to achieve, and I really wanted to make it happen. And at that time, I didn't realize all the things that we needed to do to achieve that. It was really hard. I think we were in a place in a city where people were not used to this kind of events. They hadn't happened before there, and there were also many companies that didn't want to support a new conference. It was like almost the end of the year, and many of them already spent their sponsorship budget. um,
Mhm.
so yeah, it was hard. I think the hardest thing was like finding sponsors, like to make it happen. We initially wanted it to be like free, I think. Then we had to make it paid, and we didn't want to make it expensive because I knew and we knew that people in our city might not be able to pay the same amount that you would pay for other conferences. We were inspired by a few conferences in Medellin, um, like JSConf and ScaleConf. Those two, I think, were like the biggest inspiration for us. And I know they are kind of expensive. At least from me, they were when I attended them, and I knew that people like me living in the cities around my city might not be able to pay that much. So we wanted to keep it at least really cheap. We wanted people to come and learn um, above all. Um, so we also needed to do some crowdfunding because the few companies that actually supported us did not cover all the expenses that we had like planned for the conference. But we are really thankful that many people joined and donated so that we were able to make the conference happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's still super, super cool though. Like just someone making their own who does that, you know? Like that's so unique and inspiring. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, I must say that I didn't build that on my own. I had like around 5 people and friends helping me. So yeah, it was like teamwork.
Yeah, it's always good to have that support network to be able to help you pull off the big goals, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Speaking of, you had an all-star lineup of speakers. Like all this, I was like looking at the list and I was like, oh my goodness, like I know half these people on here. That's like super, super impressive. How did what was that process like of like reaching out to those developers and getting speakers for the conference?
So I think we had, I mean, we knew some speakers from JSConf and ScaleConf, and we also made a few friends in those conferences. So we thought of them at first, but we also knew that it needed to be like more transparent, like inviting people and letting other people also apply to be a speaker at our conference, just so that our conference was not like uh, only our friends, and it was more, yeah, like there were more people involved. Um, so we did invite a couple people that we already knew that were friends, but also we opened a call for papers, and the people that wanted to speak at our conference would just apply, and then we had a team choose the talks. Yeah, I think I contacted about 2 or 3 organizers from ScaleConf and JSConf to help us pick the talks that we are actually going to be at our conference, just so that there were no bias on the talks that we picked.
That's super smart. I didn't even know that about like getting the organizers of those groups involved. That's really cool.
Yeah,
And it's super admirable that you like considered the bias aspect and wanted to remove that from the loop. Because I mean, bias in tech is so prevalent nowadays, especially when it's like, oh, I know that person, their talk is going to be great, and it's like, well, maybe, right? But at the end of the day,
yeah,
it's important to give everyone a fair shot. So that's super awesome.
yeah.
What were the big? Actually, you know what? So one of the things that you kind of touched on is like there's so many people involved, right? Like you have the 5 people that are helping you organize, and then you have all the people in the conferences, and then you have to get the guests organized. Like that's a lot of people to be able to invite to an event and to be able to manage and like handle, really, right? How do you stay organized through all that, right? Like how do you schedule that? How do you stay organized throughout like organizing an event, right? Like, is there any tools that you utilize? Like, is there any like methods that you used?
Well, I don't remember using anything specific for scheduling all that stuff. I think we just kept contacting people every day, sending emails to companies asking for sponsorships. And yeah, I think the friends that we did at the other conferences were like a big help for us because they also guided us on what we should do to achieve um, our goal that was making the conference happen. Um, they provided a few contacts for companies. They also shared some tips like do this, don't do that, all that stuff. But yeah, I don't think we used anything specific for organizing.
Gotcha. So just natural raw talent then. That's
Yeah.
awesome. What were the big moments of the conference? Like what were the highlights, you know?
Um, I think we were pretty excited because like whenever everyone started showing up, we had like a lot of people, almost everyone who registered for the conference attended.
Wow.
So we were like almost full. Um, Also, the speakers were really excited about being part of the start of a new community, and the attendees were also impressed by the topics that we covered in talks. I think as they didn't have the chance to make it to a conference like that before, it was
Mhm.
a great approach to know what other professionals in our field was or were building. So yeah,
Right. And to be fair, that's an accomplishment. Like having so many that registered and attended, like usually what ends up happening is that like I've heard from tons of different organizers of different things. It's like, oh man, we had so many people register and only half of them showed up, or you know, like that's really impressive that like a majority of people actually attended. How many
yeah,
people attended? If you're able to share that.
yeah. I think. Well, I don't have the exact number, but I think it was around 180 people, including
My
speakers.
goodness.
Yeah,
That's incredible for a first time conference. That is supremely impressive. I mean, I know even just organizing a local meetup with 30 people can be difficult at times, much
yeah,
less like 4 times that amount. So that is extremely impressive. Huge kudos. Um,
yeah. I think we did like a big work motivating people to come,
mhm.
embracing them to do it. Yeah, just that. I think that helped.
Yeah. Do y'all have any plans coming up soon for maybe another BioConf? Or is that insider information that I am asking too much?
No, I think we're like waiting for COVID to
Yeah,
slow down. We want to like make it happen again, but um, in real person, we just don't want to build a virtual conference because I think we're missing the community building stuff, relationships.
right.
I think we can get to know many people and other professionals. So I think making it happen in person is better than virtually. And also, I think it's much more complex to organize everything doing it
Right.
virtually. So yeah,
And it
it's in our
is. I
plans,
mean,
but we're waiting.
right. And I mean, even just doing this call that we're doing right now, right? Like pulling back the curtain a little bit, like doing this call is requiring us to use like some specific software and like having XYZW and like, you know, it really
Yeah,
it can be very difficult to organize a digital event. And you're right, it doesn't have, you know, especially where it's like, oh, we had a local meetup recently where someone from New York joined. It's like, well, that's not
mhm,
really local anymore, right? Like that's someone from New York
yeah,
joining a meetup all the way on the West Coast, you know.
mhm,
And that's okay, you know. Like we welcome and encourage people, but it definitely is a different type of environment than like a in person local meetup or conference. So it's definitely understandable. Um, Either
yeah,
way, I hope to at some point one day speak at BioConf. And I need to properly sit down and finish learning like learn so much more Spanish before I can do so. But that is absolutely one of my goals. So I am excited to hear more about it in the future when it returns. And it's been super cool learning more about it because I've always had like so many questions about it. So
Mhm. Yeah, I think at some point we want to make it as big as the other conferences that we were
yes.
inspired by, because they are like 2-day conferences. They offer translations. They invite people from other countries and provide translations in both English and Spanish. Like, if people come from a non-Spanish speaking country, they can hear the Spanish conferences in English, and then the Spanish speaking people can hear the English talks in Spanish, and
Huh.
that's pretty great for the people that are not bilingual.
Right.
So yeah.
Man, doing all sorts of cool stuff. Very exciting. Speaking of doing cool stuff, you've always done really cool stuff in any programming environment you've been in. Like even going back to like the dashboards, right? Like, you'd think, oh, it's a dashboard, you have some icons laid out, but you had like animations all over the place, and like you had like little shimmer effects, and like the icons I remember at the top, they would like pop out and pop in like really cool fun ways, right? Like you've
Yeah.
always been really great at making cool experiences. And I don't remember when it was. It's been a long time, but I remember at some point you'd ping me with a question about Next.js, right? And I was like, oh,
Mhm.
is Yair doing stuff with web dev now, right? How did you get into
Mhm.
that? What was that process of going from Android to development into web development?
Um, I think it started because I just got a job offer for something uh, full stack related, and it was like part React and part Node.js. So I started learning about that, and I think Next.js came really like a long time after I started learning about web development actually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's how I started, and I think I started learning with a few courses. I think it was by Wes Boss. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I did a Node course, and that's what helped me get into the web development, both, I mean, for backend and frontend. And it just came and it kept growing. Like, as I had a job with those things, I needed to
Mm-hmm.
build stuff, and I just needed to learn it. So yeah, I continued learning it.
Yeah. And you're doing great at it. Every time you ask me a
Mhm.
question, they get like astronomically more complex. At some point, I'm just like, oh man, how do you fix that? Like that's a really really complicated question. So you're
Yeah,
definitely you've made extremely great strides as expected with an engineer of your talent. Um, I've
thanks.
always been curious though, because I haven't done very much mobile development, or at least not very much
Mhm.
native mobile development. What are the different concerns you have with each? Like so for example, the few times I have built Android applications, I've always been like, oh, I need to manage the file system really well, right? But I don't necessarily need to worry about screen sizes so much. Like, yes, tablets exist, but they don't tend to be quite as large as desktops, right? Meanwhile, on the web, you
Mhm.
need to have it work on every device under the sun. It needs to work on a TV. It needs to work, like, what are kind of the big differences when developing the two? Like what are the different ways you handle them?
Um, I actually think that your concerns in both web and Android are similar. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think when we build websites, we were also thinking about screen sizes, and for Android, it's the same. But I think also, as you said, some things are like easier, they just adapt. And I think the same thing happens if you build a mobile first UI for web. It
Right.
just adapts. So in that field, I think the concerns are similar. Maybe the complex thing I can think of right now, it's storage access, like accessing and writing files to the system. I think in Android it's really complicated, and with the latest versions of the OS, it's even more complicated. You need to request permissions to read, to write, and also the latest versions limit you to write to some specific folders only. And I think those things are easier in web. Like if you want to get a file, well, the person has to uh, bake it manually, maybe, but you can access any file that people uploads. And
Right.
also, when you download something, people choose where to download it, but it just happens. So yeah, I think that could be easier for web. But I think overall, there's always pros and cons, and they will depend on what you're building and also the target audience.
Well, that's super insightful. Do you think that's the same for data management? Like, for example, if I were to build a web application, I might have something like Redux, which allows me to like store state globally. And then I'll also have like component state to be able to manage, say, a list view, right? So like maybe that list
Mhm.
view is populated by the global storage, but then also has some local storage on what is selected currently, right? Is that same type of data management similar between Android and web as well? Like, are there different patterns that are involved, or is it pretty similar?
I think there are some similarities between them.
Mm-hmm.
I think the architecture can be planned in a similar way. I think what changes is what's being used to achieve that. The different languages will come with different libraries and frameworks to build that. But I think at the end, it's, I mean, the overall thing, it's just the same, almost the same. Um, Accessing local stuff, and then also remote database stuff, and then just merging those two to have like a local copy and provide offline access, ensuring
Mm-hmm.
state between components that can be also done in Android, like with view models. Um, yes, I think the overall idea might be quite similar. We just need to like think of the specifics of what we use to achieve that. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, shoot, whether it's web development or Android development, you always crush it. So I appreciate you
Thanks.
sharing your insights with like the development aspects. Loved learning more about BoyaConf. Again, excited for that, and also about like your history and like how you got into open source and stuff. It's been a really good time. So well,
Thank
hey,
you.
gang, that's going to be all for today. Thank you all so much for joining and hanging out. And again, Yair, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was
All right.
really great.
All right, gang. I will see y'all later. Take care.